Best program in the history of college football. What goes into determining the best program in the history of college football? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We break down the game we all love each and every day with you, and you make it work. Best discussion, debate, and analysis because of you and our conversation. So dive into the live chat and give us what you got. Keep in mind that we will take phone calls tonight at 860-325-3687. Yes, we've got a topic for the night, but you can call us about anything in college football. As usual, anything under the umbrella of college football is fair game. You produce the show, but I do like to serve up a topic. And a couple nights ago, it was disputed championships. Tonight, we are looking at all-time program rankings. So this is the deal. This is what we're doing, folks, is that I would like to get your feedback on what should be, not necessarily who are the top programs or what is the ranking or the order of the all-time programs, but what should be taken into consideration when ranking the all-time greatest programs. I am going to produce a video here in the next few weeks in which I am going to rank the top, should I do 20, 25 programs of all time. I'm going to rank them 1 through 20 or 25. What should I take into consideration? Because there's a number of factors we could involve or not involve that we think are relevant and meaningful or not. So I would like to get your feedback tonight on how you would approach this, on what you think is relevant, what you think is meaningful, and what doesn't matter. What should not be regarded or considered in ranking the greatest programs of all time. All right, again, 860-325-3687. Unfortunately, my phone's here. And hopefully we've got enough juice for the night because my charger's way over there. But we'll get started here with, again, the live chat and your phone calls. Keep in mind that our channel and this particular show that we bring you each and every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time is all because of you. Individual contributions keep us going, so we appreciate those. And of course, if you've got a connection to a sponsorship, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. And again, all-time greatest college football program rankings. What do we consider and how do we lay that out? For me, this is the list. Winning percentage is more important than anything. Winning percentage. Now, does the team with the winning percentage that is number one, are they automatically the number one program? No. But I'm saying it should start there because that's what it's all about. Winning games on the field. Most people would say national championships. National championships should be the number one consideration. But we've had a flawed national championship system forever, and we still do. The wins and the losses can't be argued. The wins and the losses. Now, there's context. There are tougher schedules, tougher conferences. There are programs that have achieved at a high level consistently for a long period of time. There are programs that have had amazing heights and then have had marginal stretches. Therefore, maybe their winning percentage is just is in competition with some other programs, but it's not been as consistently great. So, of course, the wins and losses have to be put into perspective, but that's where I start, winning percentage. I start with a winning percentage, number one. Number two, I look at conference championships. Winning your conference is a tangible accomplishment. Can't be argued. The team that won the conference, yes, somebody may think that the second place or the third place team is better, but that can't be denied. Earning the conference championship can't be denied. National championships, but again, once I start to measure in and factor in the national championships, I'm going to have to look at each one and see how meaningful that national championship was, how relevant it was, how credible it was, because we know that some of these national championships, especially going back into the 30s and 40s, were highly questionable. even into the 70s and 80s and beyond that. 1990s Colorado National Championship is basically a farce. It's a farce. They basically lost 3 games and tied 1 and won a national championship. So to me, national championships should be factored in, especially during this college football playoff era in which the teams that have won the championship at least got on the field for 2 games against 2 excellent teams and beat them to win the championship, to win the invitational. It's an invitational. And the BCS era was credible to the extent that, again, at least that team that won the national championship either had 0 or 1 loss, or in the case of LSU, 2 losses, and got on the field against a credible team and beat them in a championship setting. So the championships today are more credible than the BCS championships, which are more credible than the poll championships for the most part. So there's a lot to take into consideration. Then a lot of people would like to factor in the NFL. Some college football fans say, I could care less if my school ever produces an NFL player. And once they go to the pros, I don't care what they do. Other college football fans think that that's a credit to the football program to produce high draft picks and then players that not only get selected, but then turn out to be productive NFL players, stars, Hall of Famers at the next level. Also take into consideration individual achievements at the collegiate level. The various trophies, the Heisman Trophy starting the list, of course, at the top, followed by the various individual position awards. The Ray Guy Award, the Groza Award, the Johnny Unitas Award, the Remington, the Butkus, the Bednarik, on and on and on and on and on, the Biletnikoff. All right, the Davey O'Brien Award, all those awards we could look at. Do we factor those in? Do we factor in All-Americans, the number of All-Americans? And besides those, I don't know what else we factor in. We could go to bowl games, but then we would have to differentiate the level of bowl games. Sometimes I see some schools, and I see some fans of some schools that say, our team so-and-so in bowl games. Well, your particular program keeps going to 3rd and 4th rate bowl games and winning. So that can be compared to programs that play at the highest level of bowl competition on a regular basis. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, those schools for decades, for the most part, decades, at least for Alabama in particular, for the last 13 years under Nick Saban, is always playing a top 5 team in the country in a bowl game or playoff games. Ohio State is always under Cooper, Tressel, Meyer, Day, almost always playing a top 5 team in the country in a bowl game or the college football playoff. So bowl game records, they're a bit tricky to evaluate as well. All right, so I'm going to jump in the live chat. And again, you can call me at 860-325-3687. Everything's on the table. Anything you want to talk about concerning college football, but would like to get some feedback on all-time program rankings. I would like to produce a video in which I'm letting you know and laying out in a reasonable fashion rankings on the greatest college football programs of all time, 1 through 2025. Let's go to the chat. John Sarian, I say let's disband the NCAA. Extending the dead period again serves no constructive purpose. It's just politically safe. I see nothing, John, to substantiate the NCAA's ruling, their decision. It's ridiculous. That's my opinion. Now, I'm not going to say that I've really looked into it, that I've really factored everything in, and maybe if somebody could give me some reasonable evidence as to why the dead period needs to be extended. I get it. People are still getting the coronavirus I understand that's still until the very last soul in America, and we get 0 additional cases. We cannot put a lockdown on everything. Phil B, good to see you, Phil. You as well, John. Florida State ahead of Florida in Miami. I would expect you to say that, Phil. Florida State has the NCAA record for consecutive bowl game appearances. Okay. That does mean something. That at least means that you're good enough to get to a bowl game. You're 6-6. So it means something. I'm not going to say that it means a ton. The second line means a lot more. This is an amazing stat that Alabama is not going to challenge anytime soon, because just in 2019, Alabama finished 8th in the country. And in 2010, even though that Alabama team in 2019 was better than a number 8 team in the country, and in 2010 they were better than roughly the top 10, again, they didn't finish in the top 5. So Alabama's not going to be challenging that figure anytime soon. 14 consecutive finishes in the top 5 is remarkable. It's remarkable. The critics are going to say, how many national championships did he win? The answer would be 2, of course. And one of those could be argued, and I will argue that at some point. Again, another video series that we've got proposed as a disputed national champions series. We did a number of videos last off season. Hopefully you've checked them out, where we've looked at 1983, 84, 90, and 2000 and those disputed national championship years. So I would like to produce more of those. So if we can get that video that we produced last night live with you, I said to 1,000 views and 100 likes, and I said down in the comment section that if you give me your recommended year, the year that you would like me to review, I will do it. But yeah, Florida State, 14 consecutive seasons in the top 5 is remarkable. Alfred the Savage, who holds it currently, meaning the bowl active streak? Well, we've got Phil chiming in with Georgia at 23. Ohio State last missed a bowl game in 1999. So that's 2000 through 20 is 21 consecutive. Georgia there at 23, according to Phil. When you think across the nation, Alabama last missed a bowl game, I believe, in 2005 or 6. That was only 15 years ago. Florida's missed one just a few years ago. Texas A&M probably last missed a bowl game sometime prior to Kevin Sumlin. It probably hasn't been that long. Clemson, when was the last time Clemson missed a bowl game? Been a long time since Clemson missed a bowl game. Been a long time since Clemson missed a bowl game. Penn State missed a bowl game, of course, this year, if we're counting this year. And I guess this year is going to really cut off some teams because there were less bowl games. But before this year, Penn State missed in, well, they had the, that's right, they had the 2-year ban. I was going to go back to 2004, but they had the Jerry Sandusky business and that despicable act that they had to pay for in the football program in 2012 and 13. So we've got Georgia at 23, apparently leading the way in terms of a bowl streak. Number 1 ND fan, yes, Florida State is a relatively young program. We actually talked about that on the Florida State show the other week. You got that right, Wolf 58. College football national championships have historically been subjective. Number 1 ND fan, sure, conference championships are less subjective, but doesn't mean nearly as much. Oregon won a conference championship last year. Okay, throw out 2020. Yes, Oregon technically won the Pac-12 championship, but we also understand what happened in 2020 and that they only played 6 regular season games. Okay? So throw that out. That comment doesn't mean much of anything. Prior to 2020, throw out 2020. Teams are not winning conference championships with records less than 10-2. It just doesn't happen. Washington won the Pac-12 a few years ago at 10-3. That has been the worst conference championship record in forever. Florida State won the ACC back in 2005 at, I believe, 8-4 or 9-4. Also, on conference championships, Big Ten didn't even play a Big Ten championship game until about 10 or 12 years ago. Neither did the Pac-12, and of course the Big 12 took time off there as well. There are still conference championships, though, even though they didn't necessarily play the game. Hey, Cheryl. Good to have you in here tonight. Why don't you kick back, Cheryl? You don't need to moderate these knuckleheads. Just enjoy. Number one ND fan is telling us that conference championship games without a conference championship game cannot be valued as much. Why? I don't know. Sure, they substantiated the championship, but as long as everybody in the conference is playing each other, here we got some all-time rankings. According to number one ND fan, he's got Ohio State 1, Alabama 2, Oklahoma 3, Notre Dame 4, USC 5, Michigan 6, and Texas 7. And again, if you didn't hear me off the top, the reason I offered this up as a topic was not necessarily to, and you guys can offer up your rankings, of course. We'll talk about them. I'm not going to give you my rankings tonight. I just wanted a little feedback in terms of what should be considered. I am definitely going to consider winning percentage above anything else. I flat out think it's the most viable, credible statistic. Winning percentage. Conference championships mean something to me more so than national championships. Not that a conference championship is better than a national championship. That's not what I'm saying. Those are two different things. I'm saying it's more credible. It's more reliable. I know what happened. When a team won a conference championship, I know that they proved and earned that status as the best team in the conference. That was actually a personal call. But so I know that, again, I know when I see a list of conference champions, what happened. I know that they're credible championships. When a team won a national championship, especially prior to 1998, then that needs to be investigated. And even since 1998, those teams won a game on the field against a good team to win a championship. But we don't know and have to investigate every year to see what that particular team did to earn or be selected to be in that position to play for the championship. David, good to see you tonight. Of course. James is in the chat. Hey, James, what's going on tonight? We're talking about all-time program rankings, all-time. Another consideration I believe I'll make is that I'll take all the wins and I will take all the championships into account, but I will weight the championships and the wins and the accomplishments closer that are more recent to now higher than previous decades. I'm going to give a championship in the year 2005 more weight than a championship from 1935. I'm still going to weight the championship from 35. I'm not going to be one of these people that I hear this all the time when we get into these conversations. Well, I only consider everything since 1980 or 1970 or whenever. Well, that seems ridiculous because nothing changed from one season to the next to be able to just cut history off and say, we don't even consider anything before 1980. I'm going to consider it less for a number of reasons. But it's going to be considered. I'm going to develop some kind of weighted system. If I, in fact, produce this video, I'm going to have to get enough encouragement to do it because it's going to take some time to list the top 10, 20, or 25 programs of all time. Matthew's got the list by winning percentage. So this must be all-time winning percentage. Ohio State's number 1. There we've got an issue already at number 2 with Boise State. Of course, they play a different level of football. Boise State's at 2, Michigan 3, Notre Dame 4, Alabama's at 5, Oklahoma at 6, number 7's Texas, USC, Nebraska, and Penn State round out the top 10. Within Tennessee, Florida State, LSU, Georgia, and Appalachian State. I would like to see it broken down by decades. You know, all time since World War II, since 1950, 60, 70, 80, 90, 2000. When I did a video like this a couple of years ago, I looked at winning percentage all time. I looked at winning percentage since roughly World War II. I looked at winning percentage since 1970, and I looked at winning percentage since 2000. Cheryl, thank you so much for encouraging everybody to hit that like button. Joe, thanks for hitting the like button. David hates USC, so does, no. David does not necessarily hate USC, but as a Notre Dame fan, he might. But number 1 ND fan hates USC. Patrick, where do you factor in length and consistency of a program's being relevant? Okay. Define relevant. What does relevant mean? To me, on the field, you're relevant if you're competing for conference championships. And I'm not saying that's the perfect definition. I'm just saying that's mine. If you are consistently competing for conference championships, then you are relevant. Wool 58, no, Ohio State missed a bowl in 2011. Did they? Ohio State went to a bowl game in 2011. That was against Florida in the Gator Bowl. Now, the next season, they were on probation, did not miss a bowl game because I thought we were talking about missing bowl games because of lack of wins. Ohio State was on probation in 2012, so they missed a bowl game that year. Number 1 ND fan, Ohio State can't run a clean program. James asking, where did I rank Alabama? No, the purpose of this show is to get your feedback on what should be considered. And I'm telling you off the top what I'm considering are not just all-time wins, win percentage. Winning percentage, number 1. Conference championships, national championships. And then I think we've got a nice discussion concerning All-American appearances, bowl game records, major bowl wins, NFL success, if that should factor in. Hey, Patrick, how we doing tonight? Appreciate this super sticker. I don't know the difference between the super chat and the super sticker. I guess when it's a super sticker, you've got nothing to say. When it's a super chat, you want to chat it up. But Patrick, thank you so much for the super sticker. Your contributions keep this going. So thank you so much for that. Matthew keeps us going on winning percentage. Georgia Southern at 16. So again, different level of football. Florida 17, Miami 18, Auburn is 19, and Clemson 20. From 21 to 25, we've got Washington, Virginia Tech, Arizona State, Texas A&M, and Michigan State. James, Ohio State never dropped off from the days of Woody Hayes. John Cooper had a nice run. He just couldn't beat Michigan. And so to extend on what James mentioned here, I posted a video last off season. And the question I was asking and answering was, when is the last time each of these programs was down? And I was looking at every program that you would consider elite, either elite now or elite at some point in time. Elite now, to me, there are three for sure, possibly Georgia, possibly Oklahoma, possibly LSU coming off the national championship season. Elite at some point in time, Notre Dame, Florida State, Miami, etc., Texas, USC. And I looked at all those programs and I defined what does being down mean? Being down to me means that you can't compete for your conference championship. And if you take 1 year off and you're riding along at 10-2, 11-1, 12-0 type seasons, but 1 year you go 7-5 and don't compete for the conference championship, that doesn't mean you're down. That's 1 year. So I look at it as being down for at least 3 years. And really the only time that you can say Ohio State was down, going back to the time Woody Hayes took over in 1951, if you go season by season, where Ohio State was down would have been the late 80s. And even in the midst of the late 80s, in which they went 6-4-1 in 87, 4-6-1 in 88. So that's only 2 consecutive years because they won the Big Ten, shared the Big Ten championship in 86, went to the Cotton Bowl, finished in the top 10. That in 89, they were playing for a Big Ten championship, a share of the Big Ten championship on the last day of the season against Michigan. So is that really being down? And then in 1990, they again were playing Michigan for the Big Ten championship in 1990. The last day of the season, you're playing for the Big Ten championship. Are you really down? So you would have to go back to pre-Woody Hayes, at least by my definition, to say this program was down. Now, if you really take everything into consideration and look at Ohio State's performance and records in 87, 88, 9, 90, 91, into 92, based on what the standards are, yeah, they were down. James, how can USC be ranked that high when they are irrelevant until Pete Carroll took over from the late 70s under John Robinson? Well, USC was a power of powers throughout the 50s and 60s, especially in the 70s. I'm not saying that they were necessarily irrelevant in the 80s. They went to 4 Rose Bowls in the 80s. They won 2 Rose Bowls in the 80s. As late as 1995, they won the Rose Bowl. They had it down 4 or 5 years before Pete Carroll. Got Matthew coming back with, I gave the top 25 already from a website, 247 Sports, and it was based on winning percentage. Look through the chat. That's what we did. Second tier stats from number 1 ND fan. National championships, NFL draft picks, players, All-Americans. Okay, I think I've got my framework built. Unless somebody else can give me something that I need to go on here. My all-time program rankings, if I go ahead and post this video, because it's going to take some work, so I need some incentive to do it, would be winning percentage, conference championships, national championships. Oh, I'm going to go through the rankings. Even though I'm not a huge believer in the rankings, I'm not a huge believer in the rankings in any particular year, but over the course of time, if you're consistently being ranked, you're obviously playing at that level. The rankings generally make sense. Overwhelmingly, the rankings do make sense, the final top 25 rankings. So I think that's going to be part of the equation too. How many times did you finish in the top 5, the top 10, the top 25? Now, again, where I have issue there is that there are teams just outside the top 25 every year that were basically just as good as teams that were just inside the top 25. But over the course of time, that should shake out. James says championships during segregation shouldn't count or be ranked against current championship programs. And he's got a fair point there. The relevance of the games is much higher today than it's ever been because of the black athlete being included. So to a large extent, the play on the field was compromised greatly before the late 60s. However, we still had institutions playing college football and competing for championships, and therefore we're going to take that into consideration. But that, James, that is a great point. I've made it many times. You've probably heard me. And that is going to be addressed by me weighting the wins and the championships and everything, weighting everything as we progress through time. So again, a championship in 1995 and a win in 1995 on my scale is going to count. This is going to create a lot of work for me. But 1995 is going to count more for than a championship or a win even in 1945. What's going to make that more difficult in accounting for that is, of course, that segregation was, and desegregation was gradual. Nobody snapped their fingers and righted the wrongs from previous generations and said, everybody can play. Excuse me, everybody can play right now. Mo Dean. Alabama #1 with 15 natties. Notre Dame #2 with 13. Ohio State with 8 is #3. And so I think Mo Dean is going to the AP poll for that. Alabama, I believe, is claiming 18 national championships. Wool 58, Notre Dame is the most overrated program of the last 30 years. I get what you're saying. I think I think a better way to state it might be that Notre Dame gets talked about more and given more attention in comparison to how much they win over the last 30 years than any other program. I don't know that they're overrated. I don't think anybody says Notre Dame is amazing and Notre Dame is dominant. I think everybody pretty much understands what Notre Dame has failed to do over the last 30 years versus what they have accomplished and how they've upgraded under Brian Kelly. Notre Dame has been largely marginal between Lou Holtz and Brian Kelly, but Brian Kelly now is producing top 5 teams. Third tier for number 1 ND fan. Conference championships. Weeks ranked in the AP top 25 conference winning percentage. And again, I'm going to make it tough on myself, number 1 ND fan. If I take this on, I'm going to need a lot of encouragement to take this on. I even want to differentiate between high rankings and lower rankings. Let's take a program like Oklahoma and compare it to a program like Texas A&M. That over a long period of time, that if we just had a column that showed how many times a program was ranked in the final poll, we're going to see programs that are decent programs, but they have typically been ranked in the lower portion of the poll versus teams that are typically at the high end of the poll, and we need to account for that. Oklahoma's constantly in the top 10. Texas A&M, throughout the last 30 years, has consistently been barely ranked. Modine, if you don't consider past championships as much as more current ones, why do you rank Babe Ruth as the best of all time? Okay, I didn't say Babe Ruth is the best baseball player of all time. I said Babe Ruth was the most dominant baseball player of all time against his peers. He is the most dominant baseball player of all time. I don't even think it's debatable against his peers. James, Alabama championships during those early years shouldn't count because they were given championships by the AP poll. Alabama was awarded championships for losing bowl games during those days. Yes, we will look into that. The more I talk about this, the less I'm interested in really digging through all this. Hello, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Hey, what's going on, man? I'm good. What's on your mind tonight? I think that Gus Malzahn is most likely a better football coach than Josh Heupel. So just making that comparison makes it an upgrade for UCF. Gus Malzahn got criticized, and I criticized him at times, that I think Auburn underachieved with 4 to 5 losses per year, but they were also playing typically one of the 3 or 4 toughest schedules in the country. Gus Malzahn knows what he's doing. He's going to be able to play at a school where there's already kind of a cachet to Central Florida and UCF nationally, that they're a brand in the group of 5, unlike just about anybody else in the group of 5 based on what they've done the last few years. He's in the middle of a ton of speed and talent that's going to be able to really work his offense, I think he's going to be highly successful there. I agree. Again, he had the great first year with Auburn. That kind of set him up for expectations that might have been a little bit unreasonable. But I think that Auburn should be a top 15 team if they've got the right people in place. They have recruited, he typically recruited top 10 classes. I actually got the list right behind me. But and so I think it was disappointing that they lost as many games that they did. But I think he's a capable coach. I don't think he's a great coach. But he knows what he's doing. He knows how to run a program. They were clean the whole time. What's that? So you're saying they've got a quarterback on the roster better than Bo Nix? Yeah, I've seen Bo Nix play plenty of football, and I think he's an athlete playing quarterback, and he's a decent quarterback. I don't think that he's anything special. I think he makes a lot of mistakes and makes a lot of bad decisions, and I don't think he's very accurate. But he can make plays with his legs, and I think he's got a strong enough arm. All right, anything else? Hey, we appreciate the call. You have a good night. Gus Malzahn at UCF. So he turned around and things worked out for Gus. He left Auburn. He can leave that challenge behind. He can pick up his $21 million, head to Central Florida. Don't know what they're paying him there. Not that they need to pay him once he's cashed in the $21 million, but he's probably making $3+ million a year there. He's surrounded by talent. I think that because of his name recognition and the offense that he runs, that he's going to be able to upgrade the recruiting at Central Florida, which played way beyond its recruiting ranking over the last 4 or 5 years. There you go, Wolf 58. I'm right there with you. The most important criteria has to be winning percentage. It's the only statistic, basically the only statistic. Yeah, it has to be placed into context. Yes, there are teams with more difficult schedules year to year that play in tougher conferences. So there is a skewed factor that you really can't account for. But by and large, it's the one stat that is black and white. It is what it is. You win the game or you lose the game, and there's no subjectivity to it. Rutgers. Well, if you want me to do a top 90, we can do a top 90. We can get down to Rutgers level. Rutgers, ironically, played the very first sanctioned, recognized college football game of all time. Right? Rutgers and an Ivy League school. Somebody look this up, or I'll look it up. I hear this game reference from time to time, but I can never remember the teams. It's Rutgers and Dartmouth. That's the first game of all time. I don't think it's Princeton. I usually guess Princeton, but I think I'm typically wrong. I think it's Rutgers and Dartmouth. Is that the game? My screen is shut down on me here. All right. For Falconer ERX, for him, Natty's is number 1. NFL players is 2. Natty's NFL players. Well, with all due respect there, Falcon ERX, I'm not going to be going with your your list, your recommendations there. Natty's, then NFL players. Just NFL players. Just okay, and then signature wins, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. Signature wins. Is that where somebody signed off at the end of the game? NCAA rules credited to your team. I have no idea what that means. And then number 5, NCAA rules credited to your team. And number 5, most swag. I'm guessing, I'm going to take a shot in the dark, that Falcon ERX, is a fan. Mighty plays. By NFL success, we are talking about a number of players being drafted and drafted highly into the NFL, or player success after they're drafted due to preparation in college. I think both should be considered. We could go NFL draft selections and then weight the higher selections. And then we could also go with the level of success in the NFL, because Tom Brady, of course, was a 6th round draft selection, and Tom Brady's been a pretty good player in the NFL. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Hello? Good. Who am I talking to? All right. I hope whoever called is still watching, because hopefully you're going to look back at this and be highly embarrassed someday. Probably not tomorrow, probably not next week, but there will probably come a day, hopefully, or you might be one of these pathetic individuals out there that's like 40, 50 years old who continues to act like a moron. But hopefully there will be a day that this will sink in and you'll think back. But although you're probably doing similarly asinine things constantly in life, so it probably just is part of the ritual each day. It's probably just how you lead your life, acting like a moron and being a coward. All right. So NFL success is on the table. John Shields, just make sure to place the Noles behind the Canes. David Knight, the bar is now open. No mask required. I cannot be held liable 20 minutes from now. Uh-oh. Go have yourself a big time, David. Surprisingly, and I'm not saying this because I know anything about your perspective on the game, number one Indy fan, but ranking Ohio State number one is highly classy of you. Joe Ressa, was Cooper any good in bowl games, excluding the Rose Bowl win? No, he was not. He was not good in bowl games, and we'll have to. Unfortunately, we don't have a screening process tonight. So if you've caught on to this over the last few weeks, we've continued to take phone calls in a similar manner, in which I'm by myself most of the shows. But on Wednesday night, for 2 consecutive weeks, we've had our guy. Bobby direct the show remotely. He has been screening the calls as well as running the call-in lines, and we've had the ability to put people on hold and have a system put in place there that's been really nice for the last 2 weeks. Unfortunately, Bobby could not make it tonight. But no, Joe, to your point there, John Cooper, not good in bowl games. John Cooper, I believe the record's 3-8. 1989, lost to Auburn. 1990, lost to Air Force. 1991, lost to Syracuse. 1992, lost to Georgia. 1993, finally won a bowl game, beat BYU. 1994, lost to Alabama. 95, lost to Tennessee. 96, beat Arizona State. 97, lost to Florida State. 98, beat Texas A&M. And 99, his last season. Wait a minute. 99, they didn't go to a bowl game. They were 6-6. And then in the year 2000, his last game at Ohio State was an Outback Bowl loss to South Carolina. Yeah, 3-8. I think that's what it added up to. All right, Phil B. Miami has no ACC championship since joining in 2004. Florida State is ahead of Miami. Probably ahead of Miami. That's the recent past. Miami fans are going to say that they've got 5 national championships and Florida State has 2. So that's to be discussed. So we may take a call here in a second. We'll see. So hang on. People are calling or somebody's calling. Where was I going with this? Yeah, Florida State has more consistently been a better program, but Miami's had high points. And off the top of my head, Miami's been a better team head-to-head. They won the head-to-head series over Florida State. I believe they've got not a huge margin, but yeah, Florida State's been consistently better, certainly since I've been watching. And before I started watching college football in the late 70s, neither of them did anything prior to that to really of any note. And they both got good at the same time. Of course, Miami won the one national championship in '83. It's a dispute. There's a disputed national championship right there. I'm not discrediting Miami winning the national championship, but I'm saying other teams, Auburn in particular, had a right to share the national championship. They just did. That's all there is to it. Check out my video. Just go to the front page of my YouTube channel if you want to check out any of these videos. And people like them. I love producing these videos. And just type in like 1983 championship or 1984. 90 or 2000. So most of those involved Miami. So 83 involved Miami. And 2000 did. But then also consider that in 1990, even though Miami was not in the national championship race and really not considered, if you really look at that season and what happened that season, Miami would have made a playoff, and Miami was probably the best team in the country in 1990. So that's one year in which Miami didn't come close to winning a national championship. And under other circumstances, if there was a BCS championship game or Colorado didn't get 17 downs to score a touchdown against Missouri, and there was a college football playoff, then Miami would have been in the running. That's going to be a great debate right there. It might be the same one, meaning Miami versus Florida State, who's higher in the rankings, because I think both schools have great arguments. And on top of that, I also may post a video in which I'm comparing and deciding who was better, the 2001 Canes or the 2013 Noles. All right, let's get these super chats in here. And if anybody legitimate was calling, please let me know in the live chat and I'll take your call. All right, we got Patrick back in here. Thank you so much, Patrick, for the super chat. AP polls are meaningless. During Oklahoma's 47-game winning streak from 53 to 57, they only won 2 national championships and were only ranked number 1 in 19 of those 47 weeks. Well, I would have to go through who won the national championships. 57, wasn't that the year that Ohio State and, no, that would have been in 54. Ohio State and UCLA split a national championship. Bud Wilkinson, Oklahoma, 47 consecutive wins, 53, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that spans 5 seasons. So they had undefeated records 3 of those seasons for sure, because, of course, they would have lost a game in 53 and they would have lost a game in 57. So in 54, 5, and 6, they had 3 undefeated seasons. So for those 3 seasons in particular, for sure, Oklahoma can claim a national championship in my book. If you're undefeated, that's all you could do. That's all you can do. All right, Patrick, thank you for the super chat. And also another one coming in here from Phil. Appreciate you, Phil. Thanks for joining in. Out of Florida's Big Three, which school is ranked at the highest on the all-time program list? Again, we have not produced our all-time program list. I served up this topic because I would like to come up with a metric in which we tackle this conversation and tackle this topic and produce an all-time program list. And I want to be able to defend it as being legitimate. It's not going to be perfect. No system and no ranking is perfect. So I expect that even though I'll do my due diligence to produce something credible, there are going to be people that are going to poke holes in it, and most of them are not going to know what they're talking about. But there are going to be many of you who are going to poke holes in it, and it's going to be legit. And I'll say, you know what? I probably should have considered that a little bit more, or you made a good point. And that's why we're doing this, because I want to put together a system and go through the metrics and have it be legit and not think of something. I want to be able to think of everything. So that's all time between those 3. That's going to be close. Because none of them did much before 1980, except for the Gators. The Gators would have done the most. Steve Spurrier won a Heisman, in 66? They had some decent teams and did some things in the 60s and 70s. A little bit. But basically, we've got 3 schools that emerged because they could finally keep the talent at home. And because of desegregation and because of their emergence in putting football on the priority list, they all 3 started to harness the in-state talent and they exploded, all three at the same time, to different levels, but they all exploded in 1980, basically, right around that time. I said this a few weeks ago, that watching Florida State play in the Orange Bowl back-to-back years against Oklahoma in 1979 and 80 was, I'd only been watching football for a couple of years at that point. But this is the way I'm wired, is that once I became a football fan, I became a football fan. I went from 0 to 100. I had books and almanacs, and I was watching everything. I was reading, memorizing everything right out of the gate. So I knew that even though I had only watched football for a couple of years, I knew that Florida State was irrelevant. Nobody talked about Florida State. They weren't on any list that I could find. It was all Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Texas, etc. And then all of a sudden, Florida State shows up playing in Orange Bowls as the top 5 team in the country, and that was not expected. And then to people that had not followed the 1983 college football season, that casually watched college football, to flip on the Orange Bowl and think that Miami is playing for the national championship, that again was a shock to people's systems, because they weren't used to seeing Miami play on a big stage. And suddenly they're playing Nebraska with a chance to win a national championship. And Florida emerged much more subtly than those two. Florida State hit quick in the late 70s. Bowden took over in 1975. And by 76, 77, within about 2 years, they were good. And then by 79, they were playing Oklahoma in the game that pitted 2 of the top 5 teams in the country. For Miami, they got good in 79, 80. Jim Kelly at quarterback. I remember them playing Virginia Tech in a Peach Bowl game, and they finished in the top 10 in 80. And then by 83, they're winning a national championship. A disputed national championship, but still a national championship. And then Florida, it was more of a slow burn through the 80s. And then they really took off. They did have some excellent teams that finished in the top 10 in the 80s, but they didn't really hit their stride. They were on probation constantly. It seemed in the, I don't know how many times Florida had a really good team that would go like 9-1-1 in particular one year. I reviewed the 84 national championship race that involved BYU, Washington, and Oklahoma. Well, Florida would have been a factor, having played a brutal schedule and gone 9-1-1, but they were on probation, couldn't play in a bowl game. But by the time Spurrier got there in 91, after he had a nice run at Duke, then Florida took off. Ronan, I'm glad to hear that. You have no idea what they said. You know what? See, I don't want to pull anything out that's going to screw things up. So I just purchased this audio board that's allowing me to take calls in a much better fashion at this point. So I'm still going through the phone, which I shouldn't. I'm going to do something about that soon, but at least I hope the calls sound better, and I have them piped through this earpiece. So we're getting there. And so I actually just thought of something that is going to help in those situations. I just have to remember to use it. So that's the first time I've been in that situation since we've changed systems. So I should be able to take care of that. Soon. Maybe I'll check on this. Mo is telling me to slam the gadget against the wall. We talking about this? Slam that gadget against the wall. I think I'm going to pay $900 for something and slam it against the wall. That would be brilliant. Let me test something out. Can everybody not hear me now? Test 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3. Anything? Nothing? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, 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 hello? Hello? Anybody in the chat? Hello? Anybody in the chat? Hello? Can you hear me? Test 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2, 3. You guys weren't really letting me know if anybody could or could not hear. So you guys could hear me even though I hit that button? Could you have heard me before? Maybe I was just muting myself. All right. Need to educate myself a little bit better on that. All right. Anyway. Nebraska is going to be high on that list. We got real talk on here. Nebraska literally has multiple teams that have been ranked as best all-time on best team ever list. Nebraska, I am not going to promote myself as being any kind of college football historian expert, especially before like the 60s. But since the 60s, I got a pretty good handle on it. And then certainly since I started watching around 1977, 78, I pretty much know, I don't want to say know everything, but you know what I mean. I know everything that happened, watched all the games. I got everything committed to memory pretty much since like 77, 78. Throughout the 70s before that, I got a pretty good handle in the 60s, but then it fades before that. And it's a lot of knowing just Notre Dame was great in Army and etc. So my recollection of Nebraska was that they fielded really good teams throughout the 60s, 50s, and 60s, but really hit their stride in the 70s, of course, with Bob Davey prior to Tom Osborne. And then from the mid-70s to 2000, for those 25 years, Nebraska could argue to be the best program during those 25 years. But for the last 20 years, Nebraska's been not much of anything. (1971) Nebraska or 95 Nebraska would squash any team in OU's program history. Modine is telling us that Oklahoma has 7 national championships. Nebraska has 5. All-time winning percentage is Oklahoma by about 4%, which is actually fairly significant. It's close, but Oklahoma seems slightly better. Yeah, Oklahoma has had a better football history overall than Nebraska. Not by a ton, but I don't think it's debatable. Oklahoma has been consistently great since the 40s. Oklahoma and Ohio State have the best winning percentages since World War II. And Oklahoma was great throughout the 40s and 50s. The 60s, I can't vouch for Oklahoma football. Then into the 70s, once the 70s hit, 70s, 80s, Oklahoma, they dropped off in the 90s. They came back under Bob Stoops in 2000 to win the national championship. And since then, for the last 20 years, they've been on top of their game for the most part. So our final list for consideration on what should be considered and weighted in ranking the greatest college football programs of all time, to me, looks like this. Winning percentage. Conference championships, which means I don't know what I'm going to do with Notre Dame. Conference championships. Okay. Poll rankings. And you guys know me. I'm going to grind this down to the granular. It's not good enough for me just to say Ohio State's been ranked 68 times and Oklahoma's been ranked 65 times and Ole Miss has been ranked 29 times. Again, I'm going to break it down to top 5 final rankings, top 10 final rankings, and top 25. I'll probably go with those 3. And of course, in the old days, there was no top 25. There was a top 20 until 1989. And if I had the spreadsheets to do it and the manpower to do it, I would even break it down further than that. And I would give certain amounts of points to number 1 finish, number 2, number 3, number 4, on down the line. But that's crazy talk. So winning percentage, conference championships, whole ranking, national championships, legit national championships. Okay. Maybe major bowl wins, possibly. NFL draft. Okay, the one thing that there is no way that we're going to be able to, there is one thing that we are never going to be able to account for because it's just too much, is success in the NFL. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, who's on the line? David, I'm doing well. What's going on tonight? Oh boy, here we go. All right. Okay. Okay, let me read you my list. So what I did tonight was say, instead of coming on here and saying, I think a lot of people anticipated that I was going to come on and say, hang on just a second, nobody can hear you. I don't know why. I can. I don't know why nobody can hear you. Huh. Yes, I can hear you. And hang on just a second. Ronan says, Mark, we haven't a clue what the callers are saying. It's just you talking to yourself. Can't hear the caller. Nothing's changed here. Hang on just a second. Let me look at something on the phone real quick. Let me see if I can pull up. I need it on a particular setting, but I don't know how to find that. Oh, it's connected. I don't know why that wouldn't be like that. So nobody can hear David, right? Nobody can hear. Oh, I got levels for you. I don't know why. Wow, that's weird. Yes, I can, but everybody's saying that they can't hear you, and I'm checking everything, and I haven't changed anything. We've had other callers, and they were fine. Okay, this is what we're going to do, David. I'm going to, no, I don't think that's going to help us. I'm going to just stay on the line. I'm going to unhook everything, and we're just going to do this old-fashioned right here. All right, David, you still on the phone? Hey, David, you still on the phone?
Yeah, Mark, can you hear me all right now?
Well, I could hear you the whole time. We have to check with everybody else. Can everybody hear David? Can everybody hear David? I've shut everything off and just gone through the yes. Everybody can hear you. There we go. All right, go. Okay, I will let you know, David, before you start. I was back to letting you know where we stand. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to our sound system, but anyway, I came on here, and even though some people expected me to read off my list, that I was approaching it that way, I would like to produce a video in which I rank the all-time programs and give a list, 1 through 10, 1 through 20 or 25. But before I did that, I wanted to get everybody's input as to what they felt was important, how it should be weighted, what the metrics should be. So my list, before I got anybody else's input, generally in regards to priority of importance would be winning percentage is number one to me. Conference championships, poll ranking, and I would even want to dissect that down into where the program finished in the poll, not just how many times did they finish in the top 25, but how many times in the top 5, the top 10, the top 25. National championships, something to give a metric to major bowl wins or major bowl appearances. And then on a second level, more of the individual route in which you were headed with awards, NFL draft selections, and then a difficult one to equate would be NFL success. You know, when you're looking at Ohio State producing however many NFL players and then trying to put a weight on the level of success is almost impossible.
Well, wouldn't you say, though, Mark, with NFL success, I mean, you have to kind of keep NFL success separate from, like, you know, what they can perform in college, because we are just talking about ranking college teams on.
True.
I mean, because
you could.
Yeah, I mean, certain players, like, you know, being an Ohio State fan, you know, Andy Katzenmoyer is one of the 3 or 4 greatest linebackers in the history of Ohio State, but how did his NFL career turn out?
Sure.
I mean, and to some degree, no fault of his own. I mean, he had some major injuries that basically cost him his career. I would say, I would agree with you. The other point I would add, and I don't know if you added this, because I remember when we were talking about what are the top 5 or 10 jobs in college football, and that was also kind of contingent upon when that question is asked. How much does just in general national relevance play in your discussion? Because, again, if we were ranking this in the 80s or the 90s, how high would we have Nebraska, let's say, compared to today? Right?
Where would we have Nebraska today versus when?
Let's say in the 90s, obviously, or even early 2000s.
Well, that's when they were winning.
Right. That's what I'm saying, is how much do you put into, you know, national relevance into importance with ranking these programs? Or are you just saying this is from an all-time perspective, that's basically?
I guess the reason I'm not following you, David, is because you're. Okay. If you brought up, let's say, for example, a program that you felt was very popular and gained a lot of attention but didn't win much, then I could understand your point. But you're bringing up Nebraska being dominant on the field, therefore that would be accounted for in our metrics.
Okay.
If you follow me.
All right. Right. Okay, well, let me start off with my top 5.
Okay.
And I can kind of expand it from there.
Yep.
My top 5 as follows, and very close. Number 5 is Oklahoma. I have a tie, or I have a very close number 4 and number 3. I have USC and Ohio State really close at 4 and 3. Okay. How close do you think that is?
Well, off the top of my head, I think it's extremely close for one thing, and I'm going far down the list to grab this comparison, but every year around NFL draft time, we are met with the statistic that they're at the top of the list all time in regards to both overall NFL draft selections and also first round selections.
Okay. See, I put, to show that I'm not necessarily being a homer here, I put Ohio State at 4 and USC at 3. I put Notre Dame at 2 and Alabama at 1. That's my top 5.
Okay. USC has certainly had just a dominant run of both appearing in the Rose Bowl and winning Rose Bowls. As you well know, they're so far ahead of everybody else.
Sure.
That shows. I think that's the tiebreaker if there was going to be one between them and Ohio State.
Right. Well, they're Rose Bowls, and I think they have the second most bowl victories of all time after Alabama. Correct, Mark?
Yes. Penn State's up there. Alabama's up. Yeah. I would also want to differentiate just the level of bowl games because,
sure,
a school like Ole Miss has a pretty impressive bowl record, but they're typically not playing in decent bowl games.
Right, but they played by far the most Rose Bowls, and I think by far won the most Rose Bowls, if I'm not mistaken, with USA.
Sure.
So I think that also needs to be factored in, along with Heisman, national titles, certain ways to produce a ton of NFL players. In fact, Ohio State just passed them, a couple of years ago, for the most first-round draft picks ever produced in the NFL. The only thing we would say with USC is, I mentioned national relevance. They've kind of fallen off a little bit, let's say, in the post-Pete Carroll era a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Well, sure. Yeah, that's...
Well, yeah, so that's kind of where I was going, Mark. Are you still, does it take away a little bit that you're not necessarily the contender that you once were as far as ranking them?
Well, yeah, each season that a program's either successful or not successful is going to either add or detract from their ranking.
Okay. Like, I think you said Notre Dame is far more national relevant right now than USC.
Yes. And if we're looking at all-time ranks, then if we were doing this 10 years ago, then USC would be higher, much more considered all-time than they are now.
Right. Yeah, I think that now the tough part is if we were to do 6 through 10 and formulate a top 10. I think that's when you get into more controversy. Because I think my top 5 is pretty solid. What do you think?
Sure. Off the top of my head, sure.
I think after 6 through 10, that's when you debate Texas, probably you get into Michigan, Nebraska, maybe a Penn State. Georgia make your top 10, Mark?
No, I don't think so. My top 10 would include Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Alabama, USC, Texas, Penn State, Nebraska. Well, there's 8, maybe. Oklahoma. Who am I missing? I would say that, wow, you'd really have to go through the years and the decades. And here's another factor that I failed to mention to you that I mentioned to everybody else, is that I would weight the system. The more recent the accomplishment, the more weighty. I would give, and I don't know how much more, but I would give more weight to a national championship in this metric in 2000 than one in 1950.
Right, that's true. Well, that's why I think Alabama's obviously climbed all the way to the top. I actually think in the pre-Saban era, let's say if we had this debate in 2007, I think Notre Dame might still be number 1.
Okay.
As a program. I think the recent run under Nick Saban has put Alabama as the definite number 1. Notre Dame at number 2. And obviously, Notre Dame is still a very, very good program. As we talked about, a top 10 program as of right now. But I think when you factor in, obviously, their history can't be denied. The one program that I was thinking about putting in the top 10, basically off of just the 1980s, is what about Miami, Mark?
Well, see, that's what I was going to say. Once I got to those 8 and there was no Georgia, or there was Georgia left and I didn't have anywhere else to go, I was going to say that I most likely, and again, we're just talking off the top of our heads, I would want to really dive into it and look at numbers across the board, is most likely I would put both Miami and Florida State ahead of Georgia.
I would agree. I think that obviously, that their run is more recent. Basically the 80s. They basically established their run of being great teams, since then. I mean, they weren't running this program from obviously the 60s or the 70s.
Exactly.
So,
and the other thing is that you might be surprised as an Ohio State fan, but you're ranking them 4th, and just about everybody who left a ranking in the chat put Ohio State number 1. Now, I don't know if those are Ohio State fans or not.
Here's how I feel, and I've always said this about the Ohio State history, and I'll always cast like this, and every Buckeye fan, when they think about it, has to say this. The bottom line is, as great as Ohio State history is, and it's clearly top 5, it could be that much greater. And you go back to the Woody Hayes era, you can go back to John Cooper era in the close calls. Urban Meyer won 1 national title. We thought he could have won another one. Certainly Jim Tressel had opportunities to win another one. And I'm saying, and I kind of agree with your point, Mark. I think we put you think we put a little too much weight behind national titles. Or is that a fair statement?
I sure do. That's why Alabama's going to be ranked number 1 by whomever ranks them number 1, including yourself, is national championships. I don't.
Sure.
I think the most pure metric is winning percentage, and Ohio State is the best winning percentage of all time.
Right, that's true. The one thing I would say is that Ohio State, and maybe I'm playing national titles too much. I just think from an Ohio State perspective, is that knowing how many great players we've had and how many players have been in the NFL, and with the Heisman Trophy winners and with the first-round draft picks, I think we should have a few more. Let's just put it that way. And
sure.
I know we've caught some bad breaks over the years, but there's no way we should have gone through John Cooper era and not gotten 1 national. Only got should have gotten at least 1 national title. Our greatest coach ever probably Woody Hayes could have 2 or 3 more national titles.
Oh yeah.
And certainly talk about the Tressel era and the Meyer era. Both could have produced more than 1 national title.
Yes.
So, and then if that would have happened, then I think we could really make a strong case. Then we would have everything, because we already have the All-Americans, the first-round draft picks, the Heisman Trophy winners, the winning percentage, the conference championships. We've met all the criteria. But if you piled on 4 or 5 more national titles onto that history, then we could really have a discussion.
Yeah. Well,
That's
see, for me, if this was the same conversation, but it was the NFL, and let's say, I'm just picking 2 teams. I'm not saying that these would be the franchises involved, but if the Packers had the best winning percentage of all time, and let's say the Steelers were like 7th, but had the most Super Bowl wins and Super Bowl appearances, and let's say the Super Bowl had been played since the beginning of NFL existence, NFL championships, then I would still value the consistency of the winning if there was that kind of disparity between 1 and 7. But if the Packers were number 1 and the Steelers were 2nd or 3rd and had all those Super Bowl appearances and championships, had 18 versus like 7, then I would vault the number 2 or 3 team to number 1 in my rankings because of the strength of the credibility I would give to the championships being objective. But see, in college football, they're not. So I just think the national championship it means a lot. That's why the reason they're playing. I just think it's just not as credible to me.
Well, the thing about it is usually when people usually look at a national titles market, they started ranking them in like the 30s, and it was usually considered if you wanted an AP or UPI were usually the 2 major polls that people would credit as a national title.
Yeah, 36. Yep.
Right, and it's the Ohio State, and I say this from an Ohio State fan perspective, they claim 8, but 2 of them are kind of like 61 and 70 are a little bit. Those weren't AP or UPI national titles, just to be fair.
Yeah, the 71. Forget the 1970. I would have to go back over 1970 because there's a guy that comments all the time. His handle something like Ohio State 8 natties or whatever his title, and he really wants me to look at 1970. And I've dismissed 1970 as, well, you lost the Rose Bowl. How can you be the national champion? But I guess if you review the entire season, there is an argument there, according to him. I haven't gone back and looked at it.
Well, Texas lost the Cotton Bowl that year to Notre Dame and still won the UPI national title. So it is kind of a strange thing if you go back and look at it, Mark.
Okay.
So I will say this, though, just kind of, summarizing, too. The one thing I will say to the Buckeyes, we've always talked about this, is the consistency over the years. See, Alabama really has built a lot of their success on having, maybe the 2 greatest coaches in the history of college football, right?
Sure.
Ohio State really did it over the success of having really basically 5 Hall of Fame football coaches right in a row. Because all 5 of those coaches are going to be in the college. Well, 4 of them already. Well, Jim Tressel is not yet, but he will be.
Mm-hmm.
And Urban Meyer is not yet, but he will be. So Woody Hayes, Earl Bruce, and John Cooper are all in the College Football Hall of Fame. So, and then if you go back into history, I always said we had the greatest football coach in the history of football coaches. We won our first national title, which, in my opinion, is Paul Brown.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
No other coach, by the way, won high school, college, and the NFL. And everything we have in pro football today is directly impacted to Paul Brown.
Oh, certainly. It's a great point. Yeah.
So, I just think that, and by the way, Mark, if we ever did 11 through 20, well, that would get real nice.
Oh, yeah. It continues to span out and involve more teams under consideration the further you go down the list. Sure.
Right. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Always a pleasure to go over this with you, Mark, and I'm glad you brought up the topic.
Thanks a lot, David. Appreciate it. Appreciate the insight. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Our man, David Greenshield, breaking things down for us. Yeah, that's right. I unplugged the mic. Yeah, I have absolutely no idea. So you guys are telling me that none of the callers could be heard? Or somebody would have said that before. We took how many calls? Goodness gracious. All right.
The call will start at the beep.
Okay. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Oh, hi. I'm wondering, do you think people should be punished for when they pop critique?
All right. Okay, folks, appreciate all the comments that came in tonight. Again, I will most likely, I'm not going to guarantee it because it's going to take a lot of work and I don't know if it's going to pay off. If I got 10,000 views and a ton of super chats, I would do this, but most likely, I don't know if I'm going to undertake this because it's going to be a lot of research to take that on. Hello, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Yeah, who's on the line?
up, but I was just wondering, do you think people should be punished when they pop for THC and drug tests when they're in the NFL?
Should they be punished? Oh, I lost him. Sure. Okay. I apologize to the caller there. It appeared to be a prank call. It apparently wasn't, but he was asking about drug tests in the NFL, and I tried to keep him on the line, but I had my finger on the button anyway. All right. Yeah, I don't exactly know what he was asking about being punished for drug tests. We don't have an NFL show here, but we'll take his question here. Here we go. Hopefully, MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Let's give this another shot. I apologize, sir. Who's calling?
This is Hunter from Alabama.
Oh, this is Hunter. Okay, Hunter, go right ahead.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. What's going on?
Good. So my question to you is, where do you think USC stands in this ranking? I don't know a whole lot about USC from a historical standpoint, but I knew that they were good in the early 2000s and then.
Sure. So here's the deal with USC is that, and I'm going to, for as many people they call me an encyclopedia, I'm going to say that when we go further back before the 70s, I'm going to let people know I have a good framework of knowing what happened and who was good and the armies and the Navy or the Notre Dames and so forth and so on of what happened from the beginning of time until the 50s and 60s. But really, I got a lock on like the late 70s to right now. So that I can speak to for sure. Now, USC, if you go back into the 50s and 60s, they were going to Rose Bowls and competing for national championships. John McKay, I don't know if you've heard that name, but he would later be the NFL head coach with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was a legendary coach with USC that led them to just tons of Rose Bowl appearances, Rose Bowl wins, and top finishes, and won multiple national championships. I don't know how many he's got, probably 3 or 4 national championships. So he was there till the early to mid 70s. They were very good national power into the 80s. Their decade of the 80s was good, but it wasn't great. It was a top 10 to 15 decade in the 80s, but their dominance was more 60s, 70s, and then they had a decent 80s. Their 90s were down for the most part. They did win a Rose Bowl in 95, but it was mostly down in the 90s. And then, yeah, Pete Carroll had arguably the best program in college football from 2000 to 08. But USC, when it comes to winning Pac-12 championships, going to Rose Bowls and winning Rose Bowls is untouched.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just anything past anything from the 90s and backwards, I don't have a lot of familiarity with. So that's the reason why. Because if we talk about all these teams, and that just never heard USC, pop up in conversation there. And so, you mentioned some of the other teams. Miami, was good in the 90s. I mean, they had a real good. They played Alabama for national championship and things like that. And so they're one of the brands of college football for sure.
Well, if college football was just played from 1983 to the year 2000, Miami might be the number one program in college football for that 17-year span, but that's not a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's sad to see these teams that have been historically good, like the Nebraskas, the Miamis, and the Florida State, to where they've just completely fallen off. Or they've almost completely fallen off of being, except for Jimbo Fisher, that one year, but competing, And games I thought that Miami was going to be a few years ago was going to be in the playoffs going into that season. I thought that they had finally, rallied back, and they just never can seem to put together a team that can make it.
Yeah, Miami's got all the talent right in their backyard, but they have not been a relevant program since the early 2000s.
Yeah, now how were they in the early 2000s? So let's say from 2000 to 2005.
Okay, so Miami was dominant from the early 80s into the early 90s. Then they got into NCAA probation issues in the mid to late 90s, and they were off the map for about 5 years. All right, then in 2000, they had a really good team. They could have played in the national championship game. We won't go into that, but they could have played for the national championship. They won the Sugar Bowl. They finished in the top 3 or 4 in the country. So 2000, 01, they won the national title. 02, they lost the national title. 03, they were still really good. They were really good until like 03, 04. And then they've fallen off ever since. They've won just about 60% of their games since that time frame.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question that I've been wondering about. It's kind of off topic, but I've heard some people online and in other on some other people's YouTube channels who talk college football, and their complaint is that the sport has become too regional. That it's all in one location, which is the southern United States. What is your take on that? And do you kind of just say, okay, that's just the way it is, and we need to accept it the way that it is, or do you? So, what is your take?
Okay, when you first went to the comment being too regional, I thought you were going to go in another direction, because actually college football is less regional than it's ever been, but that's from another standpoint. Okay, you're talking about in terms of the concentration of the major programs. The best programs are in the same area of the country.
Yes, besides Ohio State.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a concern, because people in Chicago, or that might be a bad example, people in LA and San Francisco and in Denver and in a lot of major cities across America aren't necessarily going to watch the college football playoff if there's if Ohio State doesn't make it, if there's 4 teams from the South, if we have a college football playoff and it's Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and Clemson, it's just going to hurt the sport, because 3/4 of the country is going to not watch.
Yes, I understand that, but to me, this is my view. Is let's pretend for a second that it was the other way around, and it wasn't. It was that the Oregons and the Ohio States and the Washingtons and teams like that were the dominant ones right now.
Okay.
I would have no problem with that, because I think that we just have to accept that that's the way that things are right now.
Okay, well, think of it this way, though, Hunter. Let's say, okay, you're an Alabama fan. You live in Alabama, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's say for 10 years, you saw college football playoffs that involved USC, Stanford, Washington, Oregon, BYU, Boise State, Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, and nobody ever made the college football playoff from the ACC or the SEC for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, it would be frustrating, I guess, a little bit. But I'm always just for the mindset that you just got to appreciate greatness and wherever it's at. When people talk about Nick Saban, that
he's been too dominant in this decade, over the last decade. I'm like, we just got to accept. We just got to look at greatness whenever it's happening. I can understand for those fans of those teams that are in the North, that was frustrating. But I don't know. California has a lot of talent as far as college football. I mean,
Yep.
as far as
Absolutely.
prospects. But the USC's and the Washingtons don't get them. Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, and Florida and Miami, and Florida State, and Clemson come pick them up, get them out of there.
Well, what you're saying is partially correct. It's not fully correct, but yeah, it's partially correct. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just not the one to get too wound up about that. It would be frustrating if it was the other way around and all the northern teams, in it every year. It'd be a little bit frustrating, but But my question is, do you think anything should be done about it? Should there be action taking
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think so. It's fair. There's nothing that's not fair about it. The only thing that's not fair, is what I've tried to correct, is the playoff. The playoff's not fair, but you would still have the same teams winning in the playoff and winning national championships. So I don't think that's going to change anything. I just think that the playoff's screwed up and it's not a true playoff and it's an invitational, but that's not going to change anything.
Yeah, I don't like the way that our playoff system is either. I agree with you. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it allows for teams that clearly should have been in there. This year was just a glaring example of that. A team that should have been in there that didn't get in. And so that part needs to be fixed. And I've heard some people advocating that there's something needs to be done about it being such a regional sport, I guess. And that's the take that I heavily disagree with. And so, if you say that you don't think anything should be done, then I agree with you there.
Well, I just think that we should fix scheduling and fix the playoff, but I don't think that's going to change anything. It's just going to make for a more equitable situation and give us a better chance of evaluating the teams to reach a better playoff conclusion. But I don't think that's going to change anything. But you can't just because people should appreciate greatness. I don't think you can force them to be. You can't force them to be interested.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it is what it is. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, like I never understood when the World Cup takes place that people who never watch soccer are interested in watching the World Cup. To me, it's the same. It's the same sport. I don't like it. I'm not interested in it. I think it's boring. I could care less about it. So I'm not going to watch the World Cup as much as I'm not going to watch any soccer game. So.
Yeah, I'm not a soccer fan either. And so, the thing that I like about your show is, even though you are an Ohio State fan, you're probably one of the most reasonable Ohio State fans I've ever come across. And I like your level-headed approach to in terms of how you think about the game, and so that's the thing that I think gravitates people who are SEC fans, to your shows, because you're very reasonable in that aspect.
Well, I appreciate it. We do our best. I think it's impossible not to be slightly biased, but I try to take it out as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I wish the SEC would take out when we're playing more conference games. I love watching this year's football because it was all SEC. I thought that was a fun thing to watch, and I wish the Alabama that played, you know, like this coming up year, we're going to play New Mexico State and Mercer.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we should be playing those teams. I mean, there's just no reason we should be playing those teams. I'd like to see a schedule like an Oklahoma, and we do have a home-and-home series with Texas coming up, and I'd like to see us play like a team like USC or Oregon every year. You know, one of those teams from the Pac-12. I don't see why that's such an issue. And I think scheduling needs to be fixed. And I think, to your point, I think the college football playoffs should be fixed. I think if you can fix those two things, you know, people who are, you know, on the West Coast who are college football fans, we go, well, at least Alabama's not playing 2 cupcakes every year. You know?
Yeah.
And so,
well, I don't know if you had a chance, but I produced some videos just last week giving my scheduling system and how I would do it.
Yeah, I hadn't had a chance yet, but I did see where you were putting out some of those videos. So I'll have to check those out. But I appreciate you taking my call, and always appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Hunter. I do as well. Have a good night. Yeah, my thought process is that we need to correct both the in-conference and the out-of-conference schedule. We can correct both of those. All right, appreciate everybody here in the live chat. Thank you so much. I want to take some time tonight and correct whatever happened with the phone situation. I think there's just maybe one thing that I missed here in connecting everything because we were successful last night, and then I must have screwed something up tonight. So I'm sorry that you guys couldn't hear a couple phone calls. So we'll get that locked in. Tomorrow would be Thursday, right? 6 o'clock Eastern. We've got Brent Beard from First Coast News, College Football Sports Today, College Sports Today, I believe it is. Brent, who joins us from time to time, is going to be over on the SEC channel. We're going to take your calls at 6 o'clock, and we're going to be here at 7. Tomorrow is Thursday. Actually, 4 o'clock Eastern, Wholesome 1, Miami. And then at 7 o'clock Eastern, Cam Underwood talking Miami football. 4 and 7 o'clock Eastern time here. And then over at the SEC channel, we will be live to take your calls. And we're going to respond to viewer comments with Brent Baird at 6 o'clock Eastern. That's on a Thursday right here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. And folks, if you own a business, or you know anyone who owns a business who could benefit from sponsoring either the entire channel or any specific shows. If it's a Georgia-related business, let's say, could sponsor all the Georgia content that we produce, for example, please contact me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. We need to find sponsors, and we need to do that very soon. And we will see you soon. That's Thursday at 4, 6, and 7 live.